Alright, so we're going to continue with our book series, and right now we're on our third episode. So we're on chapter 3 of Yusupov's first book of Build Up Your Chess, the Fundamentals, this orange book. And I've tried to mention multiple times that I do recommend buying the books, and that, of course, I'm only going over the chess positions themselves and giving my own analysis, because that is my own original content, so I can share that. And chess positions themselves aren't copyrighted, but the comments, annotations, just various things you're going to get, the lecture notes and stuff, very valuable in this book and all the books that I'll be going through. And there's also just something about having a book in your hand, and of course also supporting the authors. Definitely want to support the authors. Yusupov did a great job putting this together. Dvoretsky on his books when we get to them, and Agard on his, and so on. So please get that. We've been trying to put the book links in the description. We don't get any, at least at this time, we don't get any kind of affiliate payment from that. You notice we're not doing any ads to monetize these videos. Really just doing this to be a resource for the chess community. But we do want to support the authors. And this particular chapter, I think, is very valuable for that, because this chapter, chapter 3, is going to be covering some basic opening principles. So there's a lot more prose, fewer diagrams. Once we get to the exercises, which will be the next video, it'll be very similar to what we had before, where there's a bunch of problems to solve. This one, we're going to be looking more at just starting from the beginning and kind of working through some various games. So I'm just going to give my own commentary here. Alright, so the first game we're going to look at is a game between MeeK and Morphy in 1855, so Morphy had black. So this game started with e4, e5, knight f3, knight c6, d4, so this is going to be a Scotch game, e takes d4, and bishop c4. So this is the Scotch gambit, because white didn't, recapture the pawn right away. And here black continued with bishop c5. Knight f6 is also an idea here. So we can kind of look at that. If knight f6, and let's say white tries to kick the knight, this is a very thematic idea, and in many openings where white gets this kind of pawn push in, that black is able to still gain space in the center with d5. So obviously if they capture en passant, we can just recapture in some way. And if they take our knight, we're happy to take the bishop, because we're getting the bishop pair, and we're going to have a better central presence. So this isn't really a threat by white. So we can start with knight f6. But okay, bishop c5. Still a decent move, a good move. Black's getting his pieces out. Obviously Morphy is playing black, and he's known for active development. White tried knight g5 here, which is a line. You can find it in databases. I guess it's called the Haxo-Serret variation here, according to chess.com. It's a line, but black is fine here. Black is in some ways I'd almost say black is for choice a little bit. I mean, it's I think the engine just says it's equal. I'll cheat here and check real quick. Maybe even white's still got a slight advantage. But black's going to be able to handle all the complications. It's too early in the game, and black hasn't broken any rules, so black should be fine. But okay, so knight g5, and black, plays knight h6. So this is when your opponent makes some sort of attack like this. You want to try and meet that attack with the most active defensive move that you have. And so, like in this case, developing the knight. Now, sure, the knight would rather go to this square, but of course that just hangs this fork here, right? So we can't do that. So this is the next best thing. We're developing a piece while still meeting this threat. And this is not a bad move. So in chess, a saying I have that I've mentioned to a lot of people I know is we get so hung up on these like opening principles and not wanting to make these quote-unquote bad moves. But in chess, you're not painting a masterpiece, you're just trying to beat your opponent. And so if your opponent makes a... I'm not going to call this questionable, it's not necessarily bad, but if your opponent makes a move that kind of breaks the rules a little bit, you can too, right? Because it's just a comparison. Is my position better? So you could both have ugly positions, for example, but if yours is less ugly, that's fine. right? Because you're better. It's a competition against your opponent. It's not you're not trying to paint the Mona Lisa here. So what do I mean by that? Well, white has moved their knight twice, and in the opening, unless there's a very good reason, you don't want to move the same piece twice because that takes a move away from one of your other pieces that could be getting developed. Alright, so this is not, generally speaking, a good opening idea because you're moving that knight twice. So black can play this move, which is a little bit questionable from a fundamental standpoint because you'd rather be here. But, again, concretely we need to defend against this, and comparatively, compared to white, we have 3 pieces developed as black, and white has 2. So, from that standpoint, even though white started the game, black is a little bit further ahead in development in a way. So it's a comparison. Like, this is an ugly-looking move, but in a way it's less ugly than this, because at least I got another piece in the game, whereas this did not. Alright. So continuing on, after Morphy plays knight h6, white plays knight takes f7. Now, due to tactics, this does not just hang a piece, but of course we played knight h6 to cover this, so black is going to, take back. And after knight takes, bishop takes, of course the king has to take, and queen check, and then g6. White does get the piece back, but you'll notice here, black isn't down any material because, okay, he lost this pawn, but white had already given up a pawn in the beginning. And as far as piece development goes, this knight, like, we don't really count the queens normally when we're talking about development in the opening because the queens can sometimes get harassed, and we want to get our minor pieces out first. So black has 1 minor piece out, white has no minor pieces out. Now white is still fine here. Looks like it's just equal. Yeah, so it's not like white is losing, and white can get away with a lot of questionable stuff because of that first move advantage. But white's already lost his opening advantage, right? And that's not normally what you want to be doing on, 9 moves into the game with white, is you've just given up equality. It's okay, but it's not the best. And again, I want to just bring back my point about not painting the Mona Lisa. So this, as black, this looks ugly, and I could see opponents, I could see players like not trying to play this whole knight h6 and takes and allowing your king to come here, but that's the best idea for black because white is playing an ugly game. It's just quite frankly, white is choosing some ugly ideas. They work okay, but they're ugly. They're not the best. And so black just has to be comparatively better. But this is a mud fight, right? So some games are like painting a masterpiece, and some are just like mudslinging, like in the dirt, like haymakers type of thing, right? And you just want to be the guy that gets beat up less, right? So this is what's going on here. Our king looks exposed, but white doesn't have any pieces to really harass the king other than the queen. And the queen's not going to checkmate the king by himself, so our king is actually surprisingly safe, and we're further ahead in development, right? And we have more central pawns. So the game's just equal. On a practical level, I think the game could still go either way, and I think actually black might even score slightly better than white here, depending on the database you look at, which I think makes sense, because if black doesn't get checkmated and can consolidate, he might find himself ahead in development, right? Okay, so in the game, let me find where I left off here. Black played d6. I think better is actually d5. I think both are okay. But yeah, d5 is actually the best. d6 does give a tiny edge back to white. The idea with d5 is that you're opening up your pieces, attacking this. It's just a more active move than d6 is, but that's okay. d6 is still okay. We shouldn't get hung up too much on the evaluations in the opening, especially like fractions of a point. So d6 hits the queen. And I think this is the best. I keep cheating these engine because, yeah, this is the best. It's the most active move for white. It checks the king, and then after bishop here, the queen can reroute to kind of get back. But in a way, although sure, white's a tiny bit better according to the engine, and that's mostly because black played d6 instead of d5. What I would say here is if the best is for the queen to kind of reroute and go back, that kind of proves the point that the queen maybe didn't belong out here doing all this nonsense anyway, right? Okay, But white also doesn't play the best move. So d6 wasn't the most accurate, but queen c4 check wasn't found or wasn't played. I'm sure he saw it. Instead, he played queen b5. Sorry, yeah, b5, not b4. That would just hang the queen. All right. So after queen b5, this is not the most active move. Like, notice this at least comes with an attack. Hits the king. Black is able to spend some time kind of consolidating now. So that is another point I would say in the opening, is if you're the side attacking per se, it's hard to say white's really attacking, but white's the one making the aggressive moves. You want to try and keep the pressure up as much as possible. So a move like queen c4 check, like you had to move your queen because of d6. So queen c4 check at least does two things. So it moves the queen that you had to save your queen while also making it a threat, right? If you can, you want to try and do more than one thing. This doesn't do more than one thing, it just saves the queen. So now black has time to do something like this, where this rook obviously is not doing anything in the corner, and the king would love to like castle by hand or something, right? So black gets rook e8 in, and this does do two things, right? It develops the rook, gets the king closer to safety for black, and it comes with a threat. So Morphy is following that principle of trying to make your moves multi-purpose. All right, so rook e8. Now white plays queen b3 check, but you can see how this is kind of a loss of time, because white, if he wanted to, he could have just checked on c4 the move before. So doing this and then this is just like a wasted move. In fact, I feel like black is probably already better because white's making too many queen moves. And if you also think about it, black has now had time to move the rook over, and the king kind of wanted to go to shelter anyway. So white is just making black do what black wanted to do, right? When you're playing games of chess, these whole like one move threat ideas, and unless there's a good reason behind it, like you're gaining time, or you're making your opponent make a move they don't want to make, or you're winning material, then you should probably be finding something else to do, right? So like white needs to get his other pieces out. White needs to get his king to safety. Like there's better moves than these one move threats. Before, white had to move his queen, right? His queen was under attack, so it definitely makes sense to check the king there. Here, the white queen was not under attack. We had already wasted a move doing this, so now wasting another move with queen just isn't a good idea. Alright, so here I think you play king g7 or g8. Sorry, I can't do g8, so we must have done g7. Let me double check here. Or actually, I'm sorry, no, black actually played d5 here, which makes sense. And this probably is the best move for black. Let me check here. No, king g7 is better. Now look at that, I'm outthinking Morphy. But that's okay. So and this is not a bad move. It blocks the check, but I think getting the king to safety, I mean, that was kind of the whole idea. We wanted to get our king over here castled by hand. The other thing is the black could have played d5 in one move, so d5 is playable, but black kind of also did the same thing. White wasted an extra move here, and black, earlier could have played d5 in one move, and he played d6 because he saw that one move attack on the queen. Again, those one movers are not always the best. Finding the most active moves are the best. I'm criticizing Morphy. Morphy would absolutely kick my butt if he was alive today, but we all make mistakes and we can learn from them, even the best chess players, right? And so slight inaccuracy to play d6 and then only d5 afterwards. Definitely wrong for white to go here and then check when he could have, here and then check when he could have just done it in one move. So some inaccuracies on both sides. Alright, so d5. White plays f3. Again, this is really not the right idea. The right idea is getting the king to safety, getting more pieces in the game. You can only shirk the opening rules so long before you start to get punished. Like, literally, white hasn't moved any of the pieces he has, except for the queen. Like, this bishop, this knight, this rook, none of them have moved. White gets more leeway than black, because white shirks the game. But at some point, even white is going to pay the price for just ignoring general opening principles, which is that you want to rapidly develop your pieces. Yeah, so this is not a good move. After f3, black plays knight a5. This is a decent move. I think also possibly getting like the bishop out or something would make sense, but knight a5 does come with a tempo on the queen, so you can move a piece again if it's black isn't really losing time with this move because white also has to move the queen again, right? Alright, so queen d3. Queen a3 is probably a better move, but okay, white plays queen d3. And now black is opening up the center. D takes e4. And once you are far enough ahead in development, typically at least two tempi ahead in development, then it makes sense to open the center, right? As long as your king is safe enough. And black's king is safe enough because white doesn't have enough pieces to checkmate the king. And black has... The queen is kind of developed in place because of these open lines, right? These lines are opening up. The rook is definitely developed. And although the knights on the edge aren't necessarily the best, it's still clearly more developed than, white's minor pieces are. So you're, in a way, kind of that 2 tempi up that I'm talking about, right? So it makes sense to open the center, especially if your opponent's king is still in the center, right? So we're opening up lines directly against white's king. Alright, so d takes e4, f takes e4, and then queen h4 check, right? Makes sense. Nice active developing move, and it's we're hitting this pawn and we're hitting the king, so clearly black's gonna have better, but more than just this, I should say. But black is also forking the king and this pawn, so black is winning material at bare minimum. So queen h4 check, g3, rook takes pawn check, so now black is even up material in addition to being up in development and still having an attack on this king that had all the opportunity in the world to get castled, and now it's too late. I find that a lot of beginners do this. A lot of beginners try and make all these, what I would call, too creative moves. You try to be too creative for your own good. And I say beginners, but I've had multiple games recently. I've been playing a lot of 1g3. It's a very strange opening, but the idea is that I'm going to let black decide what they want to do, and then I'm going to develop around that. But very quickly, in almost all cases, I get castled. Right? I don't ever get my king stuck in the middle when I'm playing white because I'm going to play g3, knight f3, and castles in some order pretty quickly, right? So g3, bishop g2, and knight f3 and castles in some order, right? Depending on what black does. I might have to throw c4 in, I might have to throw d4 in, or something like that. But 4 or 5 moves in, I'm getting castled every time. So I'm not running into these types of issues. And I've run into opponents that even at chess.com 2100 level, they try to get too creative and they're leaving their king in their center, and suddenly they're getting checkmated on move 16 because you can't do that. It doesn't matter whether you're a beginner. You could be a grandmaster, right? There are grandmaster miniatures you can find where the grandmaster try to get too creative and they get caught out with their king in the center, right? I don't know why that appeals to us. I think part of it is there is a principle that you should only castle if you have to or want to, it's good for you to do so. Otherwise, you don't necessarily want to because you're telegraphing where your king is going to be. But sometimes we kind of take that guideline way too far, and we don't realize we have to, right? So that guideline says only castle if you want to or have to. Well, at some point you have to, right? You can't go too deep into the game, leaving your king in the center, especially if your opponent can open lines or is ahead in development, because you've been breaking other rules, right? At some point, you need to get your king castle because that's going to connect your rooks. That's going to get your king to safety. It's going to develop one of your rooks, which, again, one of the major things with opening principles is rapidly developing your pieces. So you can't play without one or both of your rooks in the corners. So I know I'm belaboring the point here, but I feel like this is a really, really major point for especially beginners, but even intermediate and more advanced players. Don't break the opening principles. Follow them. They're there for a reason, right? Grab the center, right? Or at least be able to attack the center with your pieces in hyper-modern fashion. Rapidly develop your pieces. Don't go moving the same piece 2, 3, 4 times unless you really have to, or your opponent's giving you a bunch of material to do so. Get your king castles. Get to safety, right? Follow those guidelines. And it's also going to help you improve because if you're still going to lose games. Everybody loses games, right? But you're going to get deeper into games. And you're going to get, when you lose games, it's going to be against stronger players. And it's going to be against stronger players with more subtle ideas. And you're going to be able to learn from those more subtle ideas rather than, oh, I just lost on move 12 because some tactic because I didn't follow opening principles. So that doesn't really teach you anything you didn't already know, right? Lose better games, right? play better, lose better, and learn from those better games, and you're just going to become much stronger. Alright, so I beat a dead horse there, but again, the reason white is losing here is because he didn't follow his principles, and his king is still stuck in the center. Alright, so rook takes e4, king f2, queen e7, so all kinds of threats here, right? Knight d2, white finally, this is move 17, right? Move 17 and white finally moves one of his queenside minor pieces. Rook e3. So queen's gonna have to move away somewhere, so queen b5. And c6. So this is an interesting move here. I think the main point is that we're just trying to distract the queen away, right? So like this is a critical square that the queen is helping to protect. And material doesn't matter. I think I mentioned this in a previous video. Material doesn't matter nearly as much as king safety because the game ends in checkmate, right? So we don't care about this knight. If white wants to take time to take this knight, we're going to be checkmating this king. That's just the fact. So we mostly care about just removing this defender from this critical square. And this move does that. And here's why. Because although the queen can move a lot of places, the queen is running out of squares to move to that covers this, right? Can't go here because the pawn, can't go here because of this pawn, can't stay here now because we just attacked it, can't go here because of our knight, can't go here because of the rook just chased the queen from that square, same thing, rook could go here, that's it, right? Like we're limiting the squares, and this also helps interfere with white's idea of getting his rook active. So even if the queen does go back to this passive square, first off, we might even have like sacking ideas with our bishop, like to distract away, but it's also interfering with this. So we're taking at least one of these pieces away from the defense. So this is a brilliant move by Morphy. c6. Queen does play f1. That's the only way to stay on this square. And then bishop h3. All right, so I didn't look ahead, but like this was jumping out to me, right? Because this is a distracting move of luring away. So again, we tried to sacrifice the knight. They declined it, so we're going to sacrifice the bishop instead. And now, like, the queen can't really stay on this except for here. And again, we're just limiting all these squares. And if the queen goes here, we just develop this bishop with tempo, right? We got to develop it for free, and we cut off another square from the king, right? Queen did play d1. And this is how strong players think, right? So strong players are like, this is the idea I want, this is the piece that's interfering, what can I do to kick it away, right? So this move with tempo, this move with tempo, and all of it's around this queen being tied down to the square. Alright, so after queen d1, black gets his last piece into the game with rook f8. So like you can see how black is doing the exact opposite of what white was doing. White neglected to get all these pieces in the game. Black is involving all the pieces, right? And that's why black is winning this game. Rook f8, the king's going to move, and there's this nasty discover check coming. Knight f3, just trying to like shield against this. And then by principle, black should go this way, but black is already absolutely crushing, so Morphy, as kind of a little joke, plays king e8 because it's almost like laughing at your opponent. I know that's kind of a trollish thing to do, but the point is the king just needs to move out of the way and open up this rook against the king, right? And here I think white resigned because there's absolutely nothing white can do about this coming threat, right? Yeah, we can even look at like the computer eval, but it's got to be absolutely crushing. In fact, it's forced mate with best defense in 10, right? So beautiful game by Morphy, and really showcases why you need to be following opening principles, because if you don't, it's gonna bite you. Alright, so we're gonna move on now to another game. This one is by, I think it's Bucker versus Yusupov, 1993. So let me go ahead and back up here. Alright. So white started with f4, the bird's opening. Black played d5. That's the most, it's like the Dutch version of the bird's opening. It's like a Dutch in reverse, basically. White played b3. It would More common and better, I think, is knight f3 because it's going to cover like the square, and you need to get developed and get your king safely castled, especially when you're weakening your king side like this. But okay, b3, bishop g4. So this is an interesting move by black, and in fact, there's a similar idea in the Dutch from reverse colors. But the idea is we're trying to interfere with this knight coming here because we're going to take it and weaken the king side even more. Alright, so bishop g4, h3. Now you can kind of see white is making a lot of pawn moves, right? Pawn move, and it weakens the king. Pawn move, pawn move. Again, white has more liberties than black, but black is following opening principles and white is not. So very quickly, black is going to be better, if not winning at some point. In fact, at this point, black is already better, right? In fact, even on move 1, I think black is considered better in the bird's opening. It's not that good of an opening for white. Black's not winning yet, simply because, like, if black played this way against white, white would probably already be winning because the tempo difference by starting the game. But again, there's only so long you can get away with shirking those opening principles even as white. So I know I'm belaboring a point, but I find a lot of beginners, they like to just be too creative, and I think the excuse they give is, oh, I don't want to get caught out in some, like, opening theory, I just want to play chess, so I play these weird moves. Don't do that. You don't have to memorize 20 moves of theory. I don't do that. But, typically speaking, very rarely, right? Like, maybe there's some crazy forced line, but, like, 99.9% of my games, I'm not playing 20 moves of theory, and neither is my opponent, right? Play general opening stuff, right? You could even play slightly offbeat stuff, but don't be breaking rules like crazy, right? All right. Anyway, h3, bishop h5, g4. This is bad play by white, right? Again, breaking the rules, moving another pawn, weakening the king side further. White's still probably not lost yet. Yeah, he's not lost yet. And that just is a testament to how strong that first opening advantage is. But this is just asking for trouble, okay? Now, a beginner might be thinking, oh, well, the bishop's getting trapped. That's not true. So after... Oh, sorry, he doesn't move. It's e5. Yeah, after e5, you can't take because we have a variation on basically fool's mate, right? So that's how weak this king is. Alright, so e5, black is following opening principles, putting pawns in the center, developing pieces, right? Not weakening his king. Alright, white finally plays knight f3. And I think the only reason white plays knight f3 is because he wants his threat against this bishop. He still has tunnel vision, because he realized the checkmate threat. e4. And again, because black's been following principles and white hasn't, black's been able to gain all this space in the center, and the same thing, we're kicking this knight away, because if you take, we're going to take here, ripping open the your position in the center, and again, threatening this type of stuff, right? Alright, so white plays e3, and then now black plays bishop g6. Okay. So here, white doesn't have time for trapping the bishop or anything yet because their knight is still hanging. So after bishop g6, white plays knight to e5. And then bishop to d6. So black continues developing pieces, right? Knight takes bishop. I don't really like this move for white. White has moved this knight 3 times now. And it also helps black develop another piece, right? So black is staying ahead in development, and white's king side is still weak, right? Yeah, so again, black is not winning. Didn't think he would be yet. And again, that's the testament to the first move opening advantage. But white is not playing the most sound chess here. Okay, h takes g6, queen e2. A very curious move. Again, something that strikes me as like, I know his opponent wasn't a weak opponent, but it strikes me as like a novice type move where they make these weird queen moves. Get your pieces in the game, right? Get your knights out, get your bishops out, get castled, get your king to safety. Queen e2, just kind of a strange move. And black immediately takes advantage of that by striking with g5, right? couple things here. A, trying to break open the pawns in front of the king, because black's ahead in development. He's got 2 pieces developed. White has 0 because we don't really count the queen. So that's that 2 piece advantage that I was talking about. And at that point, you want to open the center. And number 2, this is also a doubled pawn, right? So we're getting rid of a weakness. All right, so g5, queen b5 check. This is definitely amateurish because this can be very easily blocked, and white is also just getting kind of... So the only thing I can see here is like white might be trying to go for stuff like this, but that's really too greedy, and black doesn't really care about the pawn. Like the material doesn't matter nearly as much as rapid development and king safety does. And white is, again, moving pieces multiple times, not developing the minor pieces, not getting the king castled, and getting the rooks active. This is just a very amateurish move, and this is exactly the kind of stuff you see in beginner chess. Alright, so queen b5 check, knight c6. Developing another piece, right? Black finds the most active defense, blocks the check, gets another piece in the game, right? Alright, so black takes here on d5. But again, we don't care about the material so much as rapid development and king safety. Alright, so after that, g takes f4, trying to open the position because we're ahead in development, and also trading off our doubled pawn. Alright, so after that, I think they take the pawn back, but let me just double check here. They did develop a piece, so I do applaud white for this. White just gives the pawn back, gets a minor piece developed. But on the other hand, it's like, okay, you spent all this time to win a pawn, and you just gave the pawn back. So it was, white did do one thing to his credit, which is admit his mistake, right? At least one of them, right? You do need to admit your mistakes in games and try and correct them, and that's kind of what this is. So to white's credit, he's like, oh, you know what? Material doesn't matter as much. I need to get my pieces out. Alright, so bishop b2. After bishop b2, f takes e3. No reason not to continue opening the position. And this is not a waste of time because white has to do something, so you know, after white takes back or something, like, you know, you spent a move and so did they, right? So f takes e3, queen takes e4 check, king f8. Again, chess is a comparison, not the Mona Lisa, so this may look like an ugly move, but your king is fairly safe here. He's also guarding this pawn from the bishop, and he's out of the center. And you might even have ideas like, you know, you get your pieces out somewhere, right? Wherever this queen goes, here, probably over here is more active, like the rook coming here, right? This is a good move. All right, so anyway, queen takes e4 check, king f8, bishop d3, so at least white is trying to get more pieces in the game. Queen h4 check, very active developing move, develops with tempo. King d1. Alright, so after king d1, rook e8. So like I mentioned, this was not really a bad move. This is not a bad square for the king, because it opens up this opportunity for the black's rook. Queen g2. And knight e5. Alright, so now black is moving a piece twice, but for good reason, because black has been following the principles. Black is ahead in development. Black's king is safer, because white's is still in the center, and the center is opening up. And when you're far enough ahead in development, at least 2 more pieces typically, then you can start moving pieces twice, because you're going to attack the king. Alright, so knight e5, and you're, you know, threatening to get the bishop here and rip open the pawns, among other things. So bishop to e2. And then now knight f6, just getting another piece in the game, right? Alright, so at this point, black has all of his pieces in the game, except for, I guess, this rook, but really even this rook is partaking because this file is open, so black has all of his pieces really developed. White doesn't. This knight and this rook are certainly not partaking in the game. And because white can't castle, it's going to be very difficult to get this rook in the game. Alright, so knight c3, so white does at least get this knight in the game. And knight e takes g4. All right, so sacrifices, well, first off, this isn't really a sacrifice because of this type of stuff, right? But sacrifices in general definitely become possible once you are far enough ahead in development that, you know, you have a decisive initiative, right? So knight e takes g4. And again, white can't really take this. So like, let's say white takes, black takes, white takes, black takes, white takes. Oops, rook's hanging at the end, right? And in fact, it's not hanging, but you can even trade this rook off, and you know the game is easily over, right? So this pawn is just lost. Black is now up material in addition to his lead in development, all because of white's very shaky opening play. All right, so knight e takes g4, rook g1 to try and get rid of this pin and make counter threats, right, against this knight, against this pawn behind it. So after rook g1, knight f2 check. Beautiful move. Anchored in by this pawn and this queen, and there's no time for this stuff because this comes with check. Alright, so after the knight check, king c1, e takes d2 check, right? Just try and continue to rip open that center. King b1, and we can look at if the king takes. So if the king takes, we have bishop check, preventing the king from running back, right? So we're making the king expose king e1. That's the only move. The knight covers that square, the bishop covers that square. And then we've got all kinds of discoveries. So after king e1, we have knight 2 to g4 check. After knight 2 to g4 check, king has to go back here. And then this is just winning. Clearly. Alright, so really that pawn can't be taken, so king goes to b1. So now black's up 2 points of material, and this pawn is 1 square from promotion, and he's ahead in development, and his king is safer. I mean, eval has to be off the charts for black, and it is, right? Alright, so after king b1, let me find where I left off here. Rook to h7. This is a nice subtle move, just preventing any kind of counterplay from your opponent. I think that's a nice instructive move just because sometimes we get so much tunnel vision, but if there's not a clear immediate knockout, take some time to just stop your opponent's ideas. And then once you stop their ideas, continue with what you want or need to do. All right, so rook h7, knight d5, knight takes d5, bishop takes check, rook takes, queen takes, king here, and you know white's running out of steam for his counterattack. There's just I guess what I would say is tactics always favor the superior position. So if you're worse, if you're losing, like the tactics are never going to favor you. And so on the flip side, something Ding Liren actually said that I really like is you have to have faith in your position. So if you know you've been following the principles and that you have the better position, your opponent, it's impossible for them to suddenly have some winning shot. It's impossible. It does not make sense. It doesn't follow general logic, much less the rules of chess. So if your opponent suddenly is like throwing some shocking move, stop, slow down, find the refutation, because there absolutely is one. All right, so king e7, rook f1, king d8, just getting the king to safety, and white resigned because he doesn't have anything here. I mean, black is just absolutely crushing, as we can see. It's only a measly plus 25 or something for black. Or actually, force mates are already being calculated. Yeah, so just force mate with best play. Okay. All right, so moving on to the next one. Or actually, okay, I thought there was a little bit more. That is actually the last one for this chapter. So only a couple games to go through, but we were going through basically the whole games, and the diagrams were on opening principles this time. So less examples, but obviously I talked a lot more. So that's going to end it for this video, and then I'm going to do the exercises, which like usual, there'll be the 12 puzzles from this book, plus the 6 from the revision and exam book. And that will be it for chapter 3. All right, thank you. See you in the next video.